2. Thank you all so much for tuning into another episode of Mi Casa es Su Casa. I have a very, very special guest today. Many of you know him as the host of Redacted Tonight. Some of you may even know him now as a Russian troll, apparently, you know. Apparently that's the rumors that are going around now, man.
It's pretty sad to have, grown up in Richmond, Virginia. I'm named after Robert E. Lee, and here I am.
I know. I saw your video. Troll. It's just Lee Camp, people. He's man. I must say, one of the biggest things I admire, even though you're hilarious, that's a good part of your show. But the thing is, you're like the Today Show. But the shit you talk about is heavy. It's like, It's to the point where you gotta laugh about it. Otherwise, you might cry.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of comedians are afraid to go to some of these darker issues because it's tough to make people laugh. And I think it is if you're not coming at it from the right angle. But, if the quote unquote victim of the joke, I mean, most jokes have quote unquote victims. If the victim of the joke is angled in the right direction, if you're punching up instead of punching down, you can make people laugh at dark things. And I think it helps people process them and not turn it off and not say, oh, I can't handle this. Because, even though this is my job is to cover these issues, it's like when I get home from writing the show or whatever, I don't want to turn on a documentary about the, factory farming slaughter.
Depressing.
So,
it's depressing.
So.
I would say that's damn near the hardest part about gathering information. Sometimes you're just like, yo, I'm so tired of reading this very depressing. Like, it seems overwhelming to a degree. Like it's almost like sometimes it feels like it's impossible to conquer, but then I'm sure you would probably agree. I feel like at this point, the establishment overall is losing its grip.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and I think that's where this whole neo-McCarthyism is coming from. It's the DNC specifically, but you really the whole system cannot look at itself and say, here's where we've failed, here's how we're corrupt, here's where all our money's coming from, here's why we don't represent the people. I mean, on issue after issue, you can see they don't actually represent us. Most of us don't want war. Most of us don't want the drug wars. Most of us want legalization of marijuana. And you can go down. We want health care. We want good paying jobs and a higher minimum wage. You can go down the list of all these things the American people want, and they never get done. And so they can't actually answer these questions. So what do they have to do? And this goes more for the right now for the Democratic side is they have to go, oh, it's Russia. It's not us. It's not here. It's not our fault.
Russia's the reason we don't have health care.
It's the great other and the evil other. And of course, this has been done forever. I mean, that's why we're calling it neo-McCarthyism is because we did this before with McCarthy the first time. Mm-hmm. And it took, a grand moment of have you no shame for the country to turn the tide and be like, this has gotten ridiculous. Yeah. But here we are acting like it never happened, acting like the lies we were told by our government for WMD would never happen. And now we're just believing all the same anonymous sources. It's the same fucking people pushing this shit. Mueller was the FBI director when the WMD thing was going down, and he sat in front of Congress and said, oh, yes, so we know there's WMD in Iraq, and we got to go in there. And now we're believing that guy?
And that's the trustworthy guy who has such a credible track record. That guy.
Yeah, great track record. Anybody who bought in, who helped push the WMD farce that has killed 1 million people, any of them should have never been on a TV ever again, much less in government.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is this pattern that's been established, and a lot of people have not caught it. So during the Cold War, obviously I was not born yet, but during the Cold War, we kept pointing at Russia, right? We're going to go to nuclear war with Russia. We're going to go nuclear war with Russia. Meanwhile, we never fired a bullet at Russia, but we ended up in Vietnam somehow. Russia. We ended up fighting in Korea. Russia. We end up in the Cuban Missile Crisis and start scapegoating Fidel like Fidel wasn't the one fighting with Nelson Mandela. So think about it. We turned an entire Western civilization against Cuba, the same Cuba that had leaders fighting with Nelson Mandela, and we had people fighting against Nelson Mandela in South Africa. And the whole time we were screaming, Russia. And it's like the exact same thing. We just went back into Yemen. Nobody wants to talk about it. We're still in Iraq. We're still in Afghanistan. I think what's also not Yemen, Syria, and nobody wants to talk about it. We gave weapons.
We're helping create the Yemen catastrophe.
Exactly. And then even with the Syria thing, when they came out and were like, "Oh, we're going to put more troops in Syria," and I'm like, "Hold up, we need to double back." When Obama was in office, he told us there was no troops there. That was the big debate, is whether we should put troops on ground. And now it's like, oh, we should put more troops in. And so. But the moral of the story is, it seems like nobody has caught up. They are doing the exact same playbook, and we're getting beat. Well, I feel like the majority of the country doesn't care, but we're getting beat in a lot of ways by the same playbook, even though it's blatantly obvious.
Well, and, there's great psychological studies that show that people eventually confuse familiarity with truth, with reality. So if you just say something over and over again, if you say just the phrase, Russia hacked the election, over and over again, doesn't matter whether there's any proof, doesn't matter whether it's a panel discussion, did Russia hack the election? And at the bottom it just says Russia hacked the election, ? The people just hear the phrase, and eventually they don't realize, and this is I'm not separate from it if you hear something enough, but they don't realize that they've never seen any proof of such a thing. They just know the phrase, and they think that's the reality of the situation. So, it is an old playbook, created by Bernays back in the early 1900s, and it works. If you say WMD over and over again, people go, "Oh, there's WMD in Iraq." If you say Russia hacked the election, I mean, that's the allegations aren't even that Russia hacked the elections. It's that they hacked emails that they gave to WikiLeaks.
Man,
that no one
get me started.
Ever proven that a single one of those emails was fake. It showed real corruption, but that doesn't matter.
Look, don't even get me started on the whole, whenever the 13 indictments came down and everybody was like, "Oh my God, it was true." I'm like, so what was true? You don't even remember what the original accusations were. I'm like, the story, the chronological, if you look at the chronological order of everything, nothing makes sense anymore. First it was a Podesta email, then it was the DNC, and then all of a sudden it was, oh yeah, also they were working with Trump to get him elected, and Putin was directly involved in hacking the elections. And it's like, hold on. And then it was like, and he's doing it because Trump is being blackmailed. And then you're like, hold on. But by that logic, there's only really one person in government who would be able to be legitimately blackmailed, and that would be anybody who's connected to Hillary or Hillary herself. So shouldn't we be looking at her? No. Because just by that logic, wouldn't he help Hillary win the election?
Well, and furthermore, wouldn't the indictment of the 13, these are like fucking interns at a clickbait farm in St. Petersburg. Several of them, the Washington Post themselves admitted didn't work there after 2014. Mm-hmm. So, so that indictment should have shown like, oh my God, they have nothing. If they're indicting these little clickbait farm people, they have nothing. Like when it first came out, I was like, I was like, oh, whatever. I don't know. They probably found some Russian guy that emailed Trump or something. Like, who knows what it is?
Worse. It's worse than that.
But then I started reading up on it. I'm like, this is what they have, that they posted a puppy meme. And, oh God, it was like, wow.
Oh man. And what was crazy is like the same day, the Facebook vice president comes out and like totally shits on their parades. Like, I don't know why I keep thinking these ads affected the election. It didn't affect anything. And in fact, we told y'all it didn't affect anything, and y'all just totally ignored us.
Yeah, vice president. People can go look at the tweets by the vice president of advertising for Facebook, who said he's seen all the ads. They were not even designed to influence the election, as far as he can tell. Most of them came after the election. Yeah. All of the total of them, only 25% were even ever seen by human beings. So it's like such a laughable scenario. Meanwhile, what I showed on the Redacted Tonight that aired last night is I went through everything that was rigged or fraudulent about our last election, the primary and the general, everything from voter suppression to interstate cross-check to the electoral system to super delegates. I went through the machines, all of it. I went through all of it, and I said, okay, this is what went wrong with 2016. 2018 midterms are coming up. How much of it have we changed? How much of it have we addressed? How much of it have we fixed? And the answer is essentially nothing. We've done nothing.
Probably worse. If anything, we've perpetuated the system, because the moment, think about it, Obama came out and who actually tried to sue Hillary for election rigging, by the way, tried to pretend that when Trump mentioned the possibility of of election rigging happening, which even though I'm not a Trump fan, I was like, you probably should be worried because you're messing with the master of it on the other side of the fence. And so, but Obama looked at everybody straight in the face and tried to make a mockery of the idea or the possibility that American elections could be rigged. And he said, we're not one of these other countries. Like, what other country? Not only are our elections rigged, but we're rigging the other countries' elections also. So
And in most other countries, several countries have banned voting machines because there's nothing easier to rig than a voting machine. By the way, not internationally hack voting machines because most of them are not even connected to the internet. So the idea of someone internationally hacking a voting machine is almost non-existent. However, rigging of a voting machine could easily be done with software, because no one's allowed to see the code. It's proprietary software. So in most other cultures and countries, they look at the exit polls, and if the exit polls are way off, they say, hey, there's fraud here. There's something wrong with this election. With us, we have one company doing exit polling, Edison Research, and they themselves admit that they alter the exit polls to fit with what the voting machine said. That's the opposite of what an exit poll is.
Good of a job. Because it still came out horrific. And then on top of that, if after 2%, you're supposed to suspend the election. It's like, yo, there's rigging going on. They're like, you know what? We'll just not show them the exit polling anymore. It's fine.
Yeah, now they're covering it up. A lot of them are saying a lot of the news networks are saying they're not going to fund it and keep it going anymore. So basically, the exit polling has proven that we don't have legit elections. So now they have to get rid of the last company doing exit polling.
Which is crazy because, like I said, it's like I said, we not only have we not fixed election rigging, it's like it's worse. It's worse. And I was watching a former CIA agent maybe 2 days ago. He was like, to be honest with you, I don't think we don't have a democracy anymore. Not even close. Like if you at the local levels, and it's a little bit harder to rig at the local levels in the midterms, but when we're talking about the positions that matter, I mean, think about it. With Trump's tweet the other day, I had to break it to people. I'm like, yo, I know everybody wants to be really mad because he said he's Obama's boy, he's insulting Jeff Sessions. I'm like, he has a point. Think about it. The inspector general, the guy who's supposed to keep his administration, and the FBI in check, was appointed by him. How much fucking sense does that make? Why are our Supreme Court justices, inspector generals, departments of state, whatever, why are they not elected officials? Why are they not held to certain levels of the same level of scrutiny as our elected officials when we know that they have more power in a lot of ways than our elected officials do?
And it shows that it's a faux resistance when a lot of those positions you're talking about, those cabinet positions, everything, they're approved by the Senate, by the House. Mattis, a war criminal who bombed a wedding notoriously,
Mad Dog.
Killing dozens of people, and said he made the decision in a matter of seconds and doesn't lose any sleep over it. Like, they approved him 98-1 in the Senate. So that shows you there is no resistance in our federal government. The Democrats and the Republicans, they waver, they run around and they go, oh, we're the resistance, we're standing up against Trump. And it's like, really? Why'd you just approve infinite war powers for Trump? I mean, they voted to
and while complaining about what's her name that's about to step down, the Secretary of Education.
DeVos, is she stepping down?
Yeah, she's supposed to be stepping down. That's what is being reported. But
that would be nice.
On and on, I know, right? It's not necessarily a bad thing, but on and on and on about, DeVos. Meanwhile, they confirmed Mattis like that. Didn't even think twice about it. And I was like, wait a minute, hold on. Is his nickname Mad Dog? How are y'all resisting it? This man's name is Mad. He's telling you he's crazy. You don't even deny the nickname. He's not like, oh, don't call me that. It's totally inappropriate. Those decisions that I have to make are tough every day. And no, he's like, nah, bomb the shit out of them. I do it again too. Give me the damn bomb. Give me the bomb. I press it right now for no reason.
The guy's got on a T-shirt that says "I'm fucking crazy," and they're like, yeah.
Man, so with everybody knows that you're obviously a comedian and you do politics, but I know a lot of people don't know that you actually used to do just straight up comedy. So what made you transition into what you do now?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been about 20 years of stand-up comedy. I still do the stand-up, although it is, similar to my show. It's all political or cultural. A lot of it's cultural commentary. I mean, as I say in my stand-up, so I'll do like an hour when I'm touring various cities. And as I say at the beginning of the show, I'll make one Trump joke. And I'm like, guess what, folks? That's all you're going to hear about Trump. because our problems are bigger than Trump. Trump is a symptom. Trump is the top of the fucking pimple that rose up, and it is showing you that there's a problem underneath. Like he did not create all these problems. He's just making them, showing them to us because he's such a fucking racist idiot. But anyway, how did I get there? Well, I wanted to do comedy since I was like 12 years old. I started writing comedy. Then I wanted to do stand-up, and so I started doing that at 17. And went after college, went straight to New York and just slaving in the trenches, awful stand-up gigs for years and years. Toured the country doing college.
Man, stand-up comedy is a brutal path, man. It's brutal.
Oh, man, the early years of stand-up. Stand-up's almost the only, it's the only one I can think of off the top of my head where you start out in the worst gigs. So like, it'd be like if you were, you wanted to be a basketball player, and on day one, they were like, okay, you're up against, the Lakers or something. Because it's like, you start out in the worst possible conditions. It's like, go into this drunken bar where people are angry you're even talking into a microphone.
Right?
And try and
put the music back on.
Yeah, try and make them happy and laughing. And then once you get like good and you start to get a little bit of a name for yourself, then you're playing to people that like paid and they're like, I want to see comedy. It's a completely different thing. Anyway, that's a side note. But so then I became more and more of an activist around 24, 25, and I wanted to start putting it more into my stand-up. I mean, I'd always liked political comedians. I'd always loved like Bill Hicks and Carlin and stuff. But
Carlin's the man.
I do think it's tough to start out as a comedian like that, because you kind of got to learn the craft of stand-up first, and then kind of add in the political stuff. But so it just increased like that. I kept adding more and more politics in until my entire act became cultural commentary and politics, and I'd really given up the idea of doing a TV show, because no one in TV. I mean, I'd had all the meetings. I'd met with fairly big Hollywood players and stuff like that, and none of them want. I mean, they don't say this to your face, but none of them want truly edgy political commentary. They might put on a Daily Show or something, but even that, when Jon Stewart took over the Daily Show, it was pretty fluffy, and he had to push to make it even as quote unquote edgy.
And the more edgy he got, I'm pretty sure he got out because he kind of saw what was going on. Like, if he is the type of person that wants to make a difference with his comedy, like very much like yourself, and they weren't going to let him do that. There's no way in hell.
Well, yeah, and I think that, especially when you're doing a Daily Show, I think that he something in him realized he was just kind of making fun of the little things that the politicians would say and never getting at the heart of the issues. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's his take on it, but to me, that's his take. Should be
as soon as he got out, he was like in Washington calling everybody out. Like,
yeah, he definitely had his moments. But anyway, my point was just that they don't really want that stuff. So I had kind of come to the conclusion they're not going to let me on TV, at least not to say what I want to say. I'd been on all the networks like once. I'd been on Good Morning America once. I'd been on CNN and MSNBC once and Fox News once, because they don't, they'd have me on once thinking it might go okay, and then they'd see what I have to say and they'd feel like, this was a bad idea.
You're full of shit. You're full of shit. You're full of shit.
I usually walk out the door with the booker they had just fired. Like, who let this guy in the building? We'd go share a beer after I did my spot.
Oh, man.
That's funny. And then, RT America saw what I was doing on Abby Martin's show as kind of a commentator and wanted to start a comedy show. And
you were on Abby Martin's show.
Yeah, as like a unpaid contributor, just doing little segments. But they wanted to start a comedy show, and they've given me complete freedom, and they've never censored anything I've said. And you compare that to like other networks, Melissa Harris Perry, when she was forced out at MSNBC, did interviews afterwards saying they censored everything. They wouldn't let her talk about the Beyonce halftime show at the Super Bowl because it was Black Power inspired, and therefore it was too edgy for them. So the amount of censorship going on these other networks is crazy.
Wow. That's I mean, and it's crazy. I think it's even crazier, and I don't know if you have an opinion about this, but even the independent media where they're pretending to be different than the establishment, but like everybody you hire is establishment at that point. How different from the establishment could you be? And it's so important to have media like you, because like I said, I love the format of your show. It's amazing that RT gave you that platform, and as much shit as some people want to talk about RT, it's not like Lee is not open about if there was like I think you covered the Panama Papers, right? Yeah, and there were Russians implicated in the Panama Paper, and he did not cover it because he's with RT, and that's amazing that they were allow you to do that. I see Peter Lavelle's crosstalk on all the time. He has progressives, and he even has neoliberals on to defend themselves, which is admirable. And he even has and then he has Republicans on. So and he's a conservative himself. And so to see an organization that isn't technically independent media be able to give a platform to those who are going to speak the truth is admirable. Because it doesn't exist anymore, it seems.
Yeah, and as some other people have told me, I mean, I've toured internationally a fair amount, but I've never lived in another country. As people have told me who lived in other countries, they're like, if you want the truth about that country, you go to the media that's not based in that country. So it's like, if you want the truth about Britain, you don't watch the BBC.
You want the truth about Israel, don't go read the Jerusalem Post.
Exactly. So the idea you're going to get the truth about America from CNN is laughable. And I just ask that people look at what I'm saying and actually judge the words coming out of my mouth. Don't just assume that something's wrong. Almost everything I talk about on the show, I get I'm showing the sources, I'm showing the quotes. I'm not just ripping.
That's what made me subscribe to your channel. Actually,
all this up
that's exactly what made me subscribe to your channel. I'm sure that's the thing for a lot of people. One thing that you and Ben Swan both have in common, because Ben Swan kind of does a version of your show, but just is more serious and more quick paced. But you have all of the facts, it's undeniable. These are the facts. I'm not making this up. I'm telling you when you did the Puerto Rico thing, man, I was floored. I'm like, is this true? And then of course, sure enough, you show the facts right on the screen. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people take that for granted because it's work to get the exact quotes, the exact numbers, but it's also, like I said, a testament and a tribute to not only what you're saying is factual, but it's scary because some of the stuff you talk about. The FBI thing and
a good example just happened yesterday. I did the second half of my Redacted the Night VIP. I did a thing on how right now there's advanced talks going on for Brazil and some other countries to sell the second largest freshwater aquifer on the planet. The second largest freshwater source on the planet will basically get sold for 100 years to Coca-Cola, Nestle, Dow Chemical.
I knew Nestle was going to be called. I knew Nestle was going to be involved.
Yes, and you knew Nestle was going to be exactly. And so I did that segment. Nestle then tweets at me and says, "Hey, Lee Camp, we have no interest in the Guarani aquifer. And in fact, some sources have called that fake news or something like that." And then I responded and I go, "Oh, thanks, Nestle. Tell me which one of these sources is fake news." And I listed 18 sources that they're welcome to go through and tell me which ones they disagree with. But
what? So why would they, further, that's stupid. I'm telling you, I always tell people, the establishment, just because you're rich and powerful doesn't mean you're intelligent. You just have to be corrupt enough and willing to play ball. Because shit like that, why would you set yourself up for that? Because they didn't do the research because they know, if you said it, you're going to have the facts behind it. Waiting. Because I'm the same way, man. Look, my notes in my iPhone are filled with links. Just waiting for somebody I wish a motherfucker would question my data. I'm ready for it. I'm so ready. And it's awesome because I like when stuff like that happens and you get a chance and you're rubbing your hands like Birdman, ooh, I'm so glad y'all come. Because let's talk about this. And I'm sure they haven't responded to your links, right?
Not so far that I saw.
Because there's probably some PR guy who didn't know what was going on behind the scene because his job is just to focus on PR. And then he thought that he was doing a good job. And then his people shut the fuck up. Why did you tweet?
I know. Another one of my favorites was I got in a back and forth with the official Twitter account of the So you know TPP, but there was TTIP, which was the European trade deal that was going to be nearly as big as TPP. Yeah. And their official Twitter account must have been run by some intern, because he started arguing with me about how TTIP is going to be great for the people. And I just like fucking hitting him with all these sources, like how much this is going to, just allow corporate control.
You could tell he was being so genuine. And that's what made it like, you got to be like an intern or something. He was being genuine about it. It's funny because when in situations like that, which happen unfortunately very often, where you have to educate somebody, and especially because I feel like both of us, if we get into a discussion on Twitter, which both of us get into a lot of them, you get really defensive really fast because you think it's someone trying to defend a neoliberal establishment, narrative, and then sometimes it's not that. It's just people who legitimately don't know any better. And
yeah. I don't usually jump at people unless it's an official corporate sponsor or whatever.
So what made, because like obviously you talk about the real conversation that need to be had, like that one, for example. But I guess why? Like what drove you into the activism world? I was kind of like involved in politics, and I have like a lighthearted comedic side to myself. But for you, you were the opposite. You had comedy, and it's like, yeah, I need to talk about politics, and it's like, okay, now I got to talk about the real politics that people don't know about. That's like kind of like up and down. Like you don't know how that's going to go at the time. Right?
Yeah, and it was a bumpy road, like getting random comedy club crowds to be accepting of like politics on stage. Like I had to learn how to make everybody in the room laugh. Didn't matter whether they agree with me or not. So it definitely was. It's a harder road, I think, to go down. But I started to wake up around the time we invaded Iraq. Maybe that was, I know some people woke up the moment they were, 8 years old or whatever. It took me till about 21, 22. But and then I, started reading the books that actually matter, the Noam Chomsky and the Confessions of an Economic Hitman and some of these other ones that really made me realize what actually is going on in the world. And then it felt like, once I started doing that, it felt like, how can I not talk about this? And the more I studied, the more I realized, like, we don't have a lot of time to fuck around. Yeah. We are destroying our environment at a rate that's, incredible. We honestly, and not just climate change, which obviously could turn our planet into a Venus-type atmosphere that rains sulfuric acid. But even besides that, it's like when you're killing all the bees and you got the oceans acidifying, like we could kill our food sources, in a couple of decades to get our act together. So it just felt like we don't have a lot of time. I don't care if 12 audience members walk out because they don't like to hear it. It's like I don't feel like I have any other choice but to talk about this shit.
And again, but here's the thing: if those 12 audience members walk out, and they felt like if it touched them to that degree where they walk out, they're gonna remember it. Because that's usually what people can't handle it. It's one thing if they walk because they don't think it's funny. It's another thing they walk out because they heard something that made them uncomfortable. And I feel like that's what we do. It's important to make people uncomfortable, because that's when they're going to start paying attention.
Yeah, that's one of my biggest points in my stand-up.
So on Facebook, because I had to talk about this. Yeah. I remember back in the day during the election, you would get like a couple of million views of video at times.
Yep.
What happened, man? What happened? They got you too, huh? They got you.
Oh, man, did they ever. It just basically right after the election, and for several years there, I was averaging, so my page still has 335,000 followers, but most of those came 2 years ago. And I was averaging 6,000 to 9,000 new followers a week at that point. And then it just slowly started going down to eventually to a crawl. And now they've got me down to I average about 500 new followers a week. But they're clearly unsubscribing.
And people are more unengaged. It's crazy because people are more engaged than they've ever been.
I know. Well,
people, popular progressive pages that are like telling the truth are being like.
People will tell me that they get unsubscribed and they don't, like I never unsubscribed. I just went to your page and it says I'm not subscribed anymore. It's because Facebook basically has me capped at like 335. So I may add people.
You too? I got capped at 10,000. Like right when I was at like 90, like 9,900.
Yeah.
My following just stopped out of nowhere. I mean, I was like And the same on YouTube, I was doing really well. Then the Parkland shooting happened, and I started questioning. I'm like, hey, should we be questioning the fact that 3 high schoolers are getting disorganized? I mean, they pulled off stunts in DC, Tallahassee, and organized and started nonprofits. I'm like, yo, these kids have the clout a 30-year senator. This doesn't make any sense. All of a sudden, I went from averaging like 200 subscribers a week over the last couple of months to like 5 or 6. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. And that's what I've tried to explain to people is it's not just, I think some people think that I'm being suppressed because I'm at RT, but it's all anti-establishment voices, like right and left, anything that's not fitting into the corporate media paradigm. And that's why we need to keep, I mean, this coming 5-10 years is going to be the age of decentralization. I mean, we need to move to these decentralized platforms like Steemit and Minds and stuff that are just like kind of can't be shut down because, the truth is people should be allowed to speak on these platforms. And I think once you start, as much as people may be celebrating right now that some of InfoWars things were just terminated, it's like, well, where's that end? That probably ends with me being terminated and your site being terminated and all that shit. So people need to remember that you got to defend the right of speech for the people you don't like as well.
Justice is not bipartisan. It is not right or left. It just is. It's objective. And every now and then you got to, and that includes defending Alex Jones' channels, unfortunately, sometimes. So, or the right for him to be ignorant is what it requires. And I get it. Like, I get why people, because I'm not saying that I don't find Alex Jones dangerous myself sometimes.
Yeah.
But if the censorship comes, let it come from the people. That's the only people that censorship should be coming from. If we need to be educating so that people don't like or feed into that type of rhetoric. But in the meantime, we don't need to allow a corporate giant to decide who's saying dangerous rhetoric and who's not. Because we don't like the guy from the CIA. Like I tell you, I'm gonna send you that link. I don't know, you probably already seen it, but he said that if you look at Silicon Valley, 98% of them are bought up by the CIA. Like he's like, yeah, pretty much everybody. They get these because they're trying to start up. They don't have any money. They kind of like are on that cusp of breaking through. But what makes you become Facebook? What makes you become Twitter? What makes you become like a big publication and really surpass the Steemits of the world, the MeWe's of the world, the Mind, is that last big financial backing. It comes from the CIA, and it's horrible.
And there's a lot of CIA seed money that goes into a lot of these things. But beyond that, it's like, if we're going to allow Silicon Valley to decide what we can see or don't see, think about just what type of people are Silicon Valley. They're what percentage of them are white men, like most of them. So you're instantly taking a certain worldview. And then, how many of them are pro-corporate control? Well, almost all of them, because they're working in Silicon Valley. So basically you have a mainly pro-corporate, mainly pro-unfettered capitalism, white male community deciding what we should be able to see and not see.
It's also interesting that I think that people haven't accounted for. There's got to be like a certain power trip that goes into the idea of, wow, my platform just controlled the outcome of an election. And you don't think that plays a part into how they make decisions going forward? Like it would be totally contrary to everything we know about human psychology. And so I feel like, once again, you're right. We need to be on decentralized platforms. Anything that can have and of course this is not 100% of the time, but anything that can have a CEO or a single board making all the decisions for something where 50% of the people get their news from, that's a problem.
And let's get into boards for a moment. It's not just on the internet, but corporations, which rule most of our lives in a lot of ways, are a totalitarian structure. They are not a democracy. So, economist Richard Wolff talks a lot about this, that step one to a better world would be to democratize the workplace. Workers need to have a right in what these companies are doing and what they're not doing. Instead, what we've got is very power hungry, very rich elite members on these boards deciding most of our lives, most of the structure of our society, what we take in, what we see, what we eat. Like just about everything in our lives is decided by a very elite power class that is on these boards. And there's no elections, there's no democracy to it. I mean, and that's another way that we talked earlier about election rigging, but that's another way our democracy is a fraud. These corporations have become as powerful as most countries, and yet we still act like they should just be a totalitarian structure.
And I would say, and I'm going to partially end with this, but I would say even that corporations, it's not coincidence that they run it like that. That's how our government is run. They're beholden to the stockholders. And even though you or I may have a couple of stocks, who has the most stocks?
Yeah.
The rich, right? The president, like the CEO, a president doesn't control a damn thing in this country. Their job is to preside.
Yeah, 84% of stock wealth is owned by 10% of the country. And the truth is that even if and some people go, well, yeah, but people have their pension money in stocks. It's like, yeah, but they're not the ones controlling the company. Yeah. They're not actually, the people in the nursing home on the pensions are not having a say in what McDonald's does, really. So
yeah, and it's what's crazy, and because that's when you're super rich and you're buying like Amazon-esque, like Apple stocks that aren't going to go up by a couple of dollars. Like you're not going to get ridiculous. You're going to really spend more money before you ever make a lot of profit off of it. But that's not what it's about when you're super rich. It's I want to buy a conversation. I want to buy a seat at the table. And that's when you're buying, even 4% of an Amazon stock or of a Apple stock or Google, like that's what you're buying, and they know that. And that's more important at that time than profits, because it'll affect the profits of all the other industries that I've invested in. And people really need to be aware of how much the stock market plays in reference to corporations and how much they play in our government decision making. Because it's the same thing. Literally, it's the same thing. Lobbyists give certain people more stocks in the government than any of us could have. And that's why it's important for us to be getting money out of politics. It's
right. Exactly. There's no lobbyist for the people. There's no lobbyist for, and by the way, lobbyists outnumber, it may be higher than this now. A few years ago, it was outnumber Congress 23-1 in Washington. Yeah, 23 for each congressperson. And there's no lobbyist for peace.
Making it rain like a strip club in that.
Exactly. But there's no lobbyist for peace. There's no lobbyist for keeping trees upright and growing. There's only lobbyists for cutting down the trees. There's only lobbyists for cutting off the top of the mountain. There's no lobbyist saying, hey, what about the spotted owl? There's only lobbyists for the profit extraction businesses in our world.
To convince you to do things that are against the people, like the interests of the people. That's what's even crazier about it. It's that's the only reason they exist. Because the corporation wants you to do one thing, which wouldn't be a problem if everybody else didn't want the corporation to be able to do that, because it could dramatically affect the community, the environment, whatever. And lobbyists are like, hey, I know they elected you, but I need y'all to vote against everything they want. And we have some money. Well, shit. I mean, hey, whatever. That's cool. That's pretty much what happens. And it's I don't even understand how that's legal.
And some of them are so powerful. The moneyed interests, like the Koch brothers and their lobbyists. They're so powerful that they don't even need to say, hey, we'll give you some money if you do this. They just say, if you don't vote for this, we're going to give all our money to your opponent. We are going to drum you out of this so quick, your head will spin. So the threat of the money is all they need now. And the guy's not going to vote against Koch brothers' interests.
Yep. So, but man, thank you so much for coming on, man. I greatly appreciate it. I know you're a busy man. If you have not checked out Lee's show, Redacted Tonight, go check him out, subscribe or resubscribe to his YouTube channel, resubscribe to his Facebook, but most importantly, sign up for the email list. Mailing lists are probably going to be what saves independent media at this point.
And if I could just give
go ahead.
Yeah, LeeCamp.com is the best place to do that. And so you don't have to remember everything. It's just LeeCamp.com. And I do have a weekly podcast as well called Moment of Clarity. So
dope. LeeCamp.com, exactly how it sounds. Go subscribe to him. Check out. Listen, y'all. Lee, I consider Lee, and like in the independent community, we all like have our specialties. I consider Lee to be an authority on the facts. No, I mean, he's a funny guy. But when it comes to the facts, when it comes to like the news that even we don't have time to talk about because it's so like grandiose, like it's huge and it's, you know, it's there's a lot of facts involved and a lot of different angles. Lee's that guy who not only can give you the different angles, not only make it entertaining, but you know it is not going to be anything but the facts. And I think it's important for people to understand that when they go to watch his channel. He has some crazy interviews, like the Confessions of Economic Hitman interview. Holy shit, like that was intense.
Yeah, people should check out John Perkins.
Yeah, that was a crazy interview. He does interviews like that all the time. So definitely go check him out. Like I said, I appreciate you coming on, man.
Thank you, man. Keep doing what you do. It's important.
I appreciate it, man. Always remember, ladies and gentlemen, find your balance. Peace.